And we're back. Hi, we have with us today, right now at BitCon 2021. It's been a long 3 days, y'all. Neil Sales Griffin from Techstars and Paige Hendricks Buckner from Founder Gym. We are awaiting Matt Conwell from Rare Breed, and hopefully we'll get him joining shortly. But in the short term, we're going to do some introductions. Can everybody see Neil? I don't know. Neil just went
I
away.
can see me.
Okay, I don't know if we can see you or not. But you know what? We're gonna roll with it. But Neil, if you could just quickly introduce yourself, you know who you are, what you do, and we'll just kind of go from there.
No problem. So, hi, everybody. Good morning or afternoon, depending on where you're at. My name is Neil Sales Griffin. I am the managing director of Techstars Chicago. Currently, I've been in this role for almost 2 years now, I guess just over 2 years. And what I do there is I invest in early stage companies. So I'm investing in 12 companies per accelerator now. It used to be 10. But what we essentially do is we invest up to $120,000 into early stage technology companies that are either based in Chicago or interested in doing business by taking advantage of the Chicago community. In addition to that, I have a lot of other hats that I wear at Techstars, where I'm assisting with some early stage investing and fundraising, especially related to supporting diverse founders. Briefly about everything else, I've been in venture capital and technology and startups for the past 15 years. I started my first business freshman year in college. Ended up building a couple more startups from there, worked in venture capital early on. So I've kind of dabbled on both ends, and my big claim to fame as a founder is I started the very first coding boot camp. So it was called Code Academy. It became the Star League. Over 5 years, we taught nearly 3,000 people how to get jobs, start companies, and solve problems, care about software. And briefly had a quick stint where I ran near Chicago. That's a fun journey in and of itself. But I applied a lot of my technology and investment skills in that context too. So yeah, I think like the most important thing for me just as an individual right now is just making sure that I'm sharing as much as I can from my own experiences to help people avoid some of the mistakes that I made in my own founder journey. And then I feel like I'm one of the luckiest people on planet Earth because I get to wake up every day and find ways to invest capital and provide guidance, support, feedback, and just as much as I can to folks that are dreaming of making the world a better place to entrepreneurship. So happy to be here.
All right, thanks, Neil. Much appreciated. Paige, how about you? Tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about Founder Gym.
Good morning. Like Dennis said, my name is Paige Hendricks Buckner, and I am the Chief Operating Officer at Founder Gym. I am also here with my daughter, Evelyn, who is currently breastfeeding, so you might hear her from time to time chirp up a little bit or see me adjusting her as we feed her breakfast. So my role at Founder Gym is really to support the work that we do to help underrepresented founders learn how to raise capital for their tech or tech-enabled companies. I've been at Founder Gym since 2018. I started as a program director for our fundraising cohort experience, and then was promoted to Chief Operating Officer last year in 2020. My background is in education policy and entrepreneurship. So I was a 4th and 5th grade teacher. I moved to Portland, Oregon, and I got into public policy work where I was a policy director for an elected official. And then I moved into entrepreneurship. I went to a startup weekend after a long, long day of policy work and kind of fell in love with what we could do with startups. So I started my first company in 2014. I quit my day job and worked on that full time and learned a lot. I pivoted out of that business, started a second business, and I sold that business at the end of 2019. So my experience has been as a Black founder who started a business, who tried to raise capital, probably made every possible mistake. And now my role at Founder Gym is I have the distinct pleasure of interviewing brilliant experts, folks like Neil, who come and talk to us about what it really takes to fundraise. And so we help underrepresented founders learn from experts, founders who've raised, venture capitalists, angel investors, scouts, and then help them apply those lessons to building their fundraising materials and their strategies. So it's a real privilege. I love Neil. It's like I get to live the dream. I feel like I get to live the dream, Neil. Every day I get to get up and I get to work with an incredible team of people, but also we have the privilege of helping founders at their most nascent stages take their dream and turn it into a reality, and support folks all over the world by serving their customers, their investors, and their teams.
Yeah, and just real quick. Oh, by the way, love that you're multitasking.
Yeah,
that is a gangster move. I truly appreciate it. But for Mac is outside the venue trying to get in. So Mac, if you're listening, on the top right hand corner of your screen, you should see a little looks like a paper airplane with a. There we go. We got Mac. He figured it out. We're gonna bring him to the stage now.
See, I know how to use Hopin. I was just trying to figure out which link was the right link for me to use.
Okay, I believe you. It's all good.
It's my fault because I saw that we had like 10 minutes before the hour, so I thought we had the 10-minute get right time. So that's for me, y'all. Mac made that mistake.
No problem, man. Well, thank you. I appreciate you. And you're right on time. So we're just doing introductions. If you could, tell us who you are, what you do, and a little bit about Rare Breed Ventures.
All right. How's it going, everybody? My name's McKeever Edward Conwell II. Most people know me as Mac. If you follow me on Twitter, it's Mac the VC. I'm from Baltimore. It's where we're based out of. I'm a software engineer turned two-time founder, one exit, one failure. So I've been on both sides. And I used to work for the investment arm of the state of Maryland, where I started the first and only state-backed pre-seed fund for women and minorities in the country, something I'm really proud of. We did that back in 2017. And last year, I left that job to start Rare Breed Ventures, a $10 million pre-seed to seed venture fund, investing in companies primarily outside the major tech hubs. So that's a little bit about me, and I'm excited for this conversation because Neil and Paige are awesome. It's great to see you, Dennis. I know you got that Virginia Tech behind you, but Fear the Turtle is all about Maryland over here. Just had to throw that out there.
All those Maryland national championships. I would love to support them too, but we can talk about that later. So, getting to the topic at hand, I'm going to jump out with trends that you guys see because you talk to startup founders, folks who are trying to get their business off the ground every day through various means. Some bootstrap, some looking for venture capital, some looking for alternative forms of capital. What do you see as a trend for Black founders, and what types of businesses do you see them seeking funding for?
I guess I got to jump in because I had to come off screen for a second. So, yeah. I mean, for Black founders in specific, we're seeing them doing all kinds of things, right? We're seeing them do everything. We're seeing them disrupt industries we've never seen be touched before. We're investing in a company called Rebundle that makes plant-based, biodegradable, synthetic braiding hair. That's right, y'all. Braiding hair made out of plant fibers, right? Like, that's amazing. And that's a young Black woman based out of St. Louis, right? But we all also seeing Black founders concentrate a bit on problems that affect Black people, problems around mental health, problems around recruiting and hiring, problems around just having support groups, problems around finding the proper healthcare or healthcare that has cultural competency. And that is, and I should say that is what we're seeing Black founders bring to the ecosystem. It's this idea that I keep calling cultural competency, right? Within industries, there are these cultural competencies that you're only going to get if you understand or you are part of that culture. And because very often the founders of companies aren't part of our culture, the competency of the products they're building don't always speak to us. And so we see Black founders leveling that and the products that they're building. So if there's a trend, that's where I would
go.
I'll reinforce that. Completely agree with what Mac just said. I'm seeing, obviously, like there's going to be, a leaning towards things that are familiar, right? So you'll see a slightly more of a bent towards B2C. So lots of consumer-based, products and businesses, which I love, because you bring them in and then you expose them to how much more money they could make by doing some B2B work as well, and that gets really exciting. But on top of that, I think just to double click on what I heard Max say, a lot of the investment recently, Techstars in founders in particular, have definitely been on addressing problems that they've seen and experienced in their lives. So you have former software engineers and investment bankers who realize the lack of diversity within those spaces and the need for education and access opportunity. So I invested in a company recently called Equipped that's doing a lot of training for companies to provide better access and a longer kind of ramp for folks who didn't have the same privilege or network for exposure there. And, you know, the list goes on and on from there. And what I would say, though, is like the perspective that people bring with domain expertise, you know, having these different backgrounds is really what creates a competitive advantage. We know this better than anyone else. So when they're in a domain that they have access and exposure to and see an opportunity to disrupt with technology, that's where the big opportunities emerge. So I think given Mac's background, and, you know, I'm really excited to hear Paige's perspective, what I'm seeing is, you know, obviously there's just like kind of this recurring need for technology resources and capacity to actually build and produce product. And, you know, while I made it my life's work over the past decade to train a lot of people to get those skills, there's still like, there's no round of investment I've ever gone through where I haven't had a founder in need of additional technology support and talent. So that's still a problem that needs to be addressed. So that's definitely a theme throughout, because we have lots of industries that have yet to be disrupted that are ripe for technology to help them scale.
Yeah, I love that. I wanted to say yes, and to what Mac and to what Neil just said. I think the other thought that's coming to mind for me, we just graduated our 17th cohort, and it was a Black women founders cohort. It was incredible. And what I loved seeing so much is what Mac hit on. It's like Black women, Black people are building businesses in all industries, and they're innovating from their unique perspective. And I think often about their unique value proposition, what makes them the right person to build their business. And there are two things that I keep seeing when we work with founders. One, during office hours, I'll often look at pitch decks, and the biggest thing that we talk to them about is story. Why are you the right founder to build this business? And I got to tell you right now, all the Black folks, they're the right person to build that business, right? And isn't because they have a big brand name behind them in their education or in their professional life always, right? It's because they've had lived experience that makes them the right person to build that business. So what Neil was just talking about as well. And the second thing I see over and over again is that I want to encourage people to be more ambitious. Because we have folks coming to us who are building businesses that they might see as a small business. And I'm like, no. Like, actually, there's something bigger here. And this kind of, Neil, this is this B2C versus B2B play, right? Kind of helping people understand there's more there. But even more than that, it's like you're building a skincare business, which I've seen a lot come out. And again, this comes back to what Mac is talking about, right? It's like, because nobody's serving Black folks when it comes to skincare. Or you know, self-care. I think that's on mental health, physical health, emotional health. And what's interesting to me is that helping them understand what's possible, they see how much bigger this business could potentially be, because they're not just serving Black markets, right? They're often solving for Black people because no one's solving for Black people, but they can solve for so many more people too. And they can use technology to do that. So I'm thinking specifically about a company called Bahia Honey Wellbeing. They do, beautiful products made out of honey for your hair and for your skin. And I talked to her and she's like, I think this could be a big business. And I'm like, I think this could be $1 billion business, right? So let's talk about how you scale to that level. And so that's the biggest thing I keep seeing is I see Black founders who come to me have really great businesses that can be $1 billion businesses, but maybe the places where they've been building their business, that wasn't necessarily a possibility, or they didn't see that in the context of their experience. And so now they're ready to pour gasoline on the fire and go build something bigger, which is really exciting to me. There's so many. I come from the Midwest. Listen, like I come from Missouri, a small town in Missouri, right? Like this is not something I grew up with. And I keep seeing these founders like that who have the potential to build these really big businesses, but just didn't know it was possible before now.
So is it that they're just not thinking big enough, you know, don't have, ambitious enough goals, or is it a real practical issue where they say, you know what, I know what resources I have. I know how big I can scale based on the purview that I currently have. And they just don't believe that their ability to scale to the point where you guys see that greater vision.
Yeah, I think I'd love to actually hear what Neil and Mac think about this as well. But in my experience, what I've seen, and this is my lived experience as well, is I just didn't know it was possible. I think that's it. I mean, it's not that I couldn't formulate goals around something more ambitious. It's just that I personally hadn't seen that before. I think that's way different now, right? Because you have people like Mac on Twitter who are showing folks the way, right? Like Mac, I'm not a Twitter person, but I follow you on Twitter because you have such great insights, right? I think people are showing folks the way more than ever before, which I'm so grateful for. But I really just think it's because they hadn't seen it, or they had not seen it in the context of their business, the kind of business that they're building. So they didn't realize it could be that big. So those are my thoughts. I love to hear Neil and Max as well.
I agree with Paige. You can't be what you can't see. Right?
That's right.
Like if you've never seen it, how do you know that it's possible? How do you know that you can possibly do it? And that was my lived experience, right? And we see this with founders time and time again. And sometimes it feels like that we're seeing it get better. But I think a lot of that has to do that we live in these echo chambers where we're around these entrepreneurs who are seeing it and getting exposed to it. But in actuality, the bigger issue is we don't socialize these kinds of concepts in our communities, right? Like when we're hanging with our friends, we're talking about football games. We're talking about what products we're using in our hair. We're not talking about investments. If we're talking about starting businesses, we're talking about starting side hustles. We're not talking about starting the next Google or what that even means or what that looks like. And so when you don't socialize it, it then doesn't lead you to the next logical step to go learn more, to want to experience more, to want to engage more. What typically happens is a founder sees a problem, starts building a product or a solution around that problem, and then just starts bumping into walls, running around in the dark, trying to figure out what do I do next, what do I do next, what do I do next. And every now and then you bump into a door and you're like, oh, there's a door. I open it up. Hey, there's a bunch of blogs to tell me how I do this. Great. How do I meet these people? You go through another door. Hey, there's a bunch of events I can meet people. Now I'm networking. What the hell is networking? This is what you do. Like that was my experience. And I keep seeing it time and time again. And it's because like more broadly, we don't socialize. And the closest thing we get to is Shark Tank, but we still don't see us on Shark Tank, right? And even Shark Tank, that's not venture, right? That's very different. So if that's your only experience, like, well, some of these people are real jerks. Why would I ever want to give away, 40% of my business and like 10 cents on every dollar I make on top of that? Like, that ain't how we do this. That ain't how it works. But like those incremental steps do get people to start moving in this direction. But I could walk into any computer science class in the HBCU right now and ask the class, what's TechCrunch? And more than half of the class wouldn't know. Like that's how we get to entrepreneurs who are bumping around in the dark because we don't talk about it. We don't even educate on it.
Yeah. And shout out to TechCrunch. They put my boy Mims on. He got a check from TechCrunch. If you don't know Mims, this is why he's hot. That's Mims. And I guess really when I think about, and I'm sorry, I'm going to get to you too, Neil. I'm sorry, I want to get your perspective on this too. But as I think about it, I mean, there's so many founders, people who just, don't go through the process long term of what I need to do in order to make this thing happen for me. They kind of stumble around and bumble around. And I like accelerators because they kind of provide that roadmap and guardrails to them to actually, see the vision and what it could be. So this is kind of a plug for accelerators and incubators like Techstars. So if you are considering kind of venturing out on your own to develop a business or a concept, take some time out. These folks have done it multiple times over and over again. They have a proven track record of success. You might want to spend your time doing that and shortcut things. But Neil?
I'll keep it short and sweet because I know we got a lot to cover and talk about. So I agree with everything I've heard. So I'll just say something very practical that I do with founders to help them realize the opportunity and the scope and how much bigger it can potentially be. I reverse engineer their desired outcome. So we talk about, what do you want? Where do you want this to land? Who do you want to help? What kind of impact do you want this to have on the world? And sometimes those dreams are small, but a lot of the times they're actually bigger. And they just don't understand the economics and what it's actually going to take to get there. So we'll bust out a spreadsheet. I will break down a very rough financial model, and we'll make it real. So we talk about, all right, well, if you're going to do this bootstrap, it's going to take you this long. Here's some of the inputs. Here's some of the assumptions. If you're going to raise capital, it could speed things up. It could make the pie a bit bigger, but you have to understand the trade-offs. So I don't necessarily encourage everybody to go through Accelerator or everybody to raise capital, but if you want to go faster and go larger, it can help if you have the right terms with the right types of investors, behind you. So long as, you're thinking through your desired outcome, you're being kind of reasonable in your expectations for what's going to happen with the business, because I also find that people tend to make a lot of very aggressive assumptions about how well they're going to perform over a short period of time that we need to double or triple, the length of in order to attain at best. But so with all that being said, so long as you have a clear idea of what you want in mind, there's a way to model it out, make it make sense, and figure out what the right inputs are for you to get there.
So my $2 trillion total addressable market is unrealistic, is what you're telling me?
Hey, I mean, let's talk about which market there's some recession-proof ones out there. We can talk about it. Everybody eats.
No doubt. Are there any challenges that you see that are unique to, founders of color?
We going to get deep with this one? Go ahead,
Paige. I mean, as deep as you want to go.
Paige, like she ready to jump at it. Go ahead.
Well, I think the biggest challenge I see is actually, I'm thinking about the expertise piece. So there are so many founders I see who don't come from tech, who are now jumping into building tech or tech-enabled companies, who are experts in their field, right? So they're neuroscientists. They might be a psychologist. They might be a physical product developer, but they're not from tech. And so what I've seen for those founders is that they're jumping in, and sometimes they don't understand the size of the opportunity. And I keep coming back to ambition, but it's the size of the opportunity and why they're the right founder to build it, and then using those two things to tell the story. So like Neil was talking about, let's reverse engineer what you're building here, right? The company you're building, the market you're building for. And so I think, and that again, that comes back to the fact that maybe they haven't been in tech or their networks aren't in tech. So I'll use myself as an example. When I started my company, I came from public policy. So Mac, you and I both know, right? Like the numbers in public policy get really big when we start talking about problems, but not the cash that you use to address those problems, right? So often what happens is you try to be way too conservative when you walk out and you think about how much money you need to do it. You try to bootstrap way too long. You think that your sense of possibility isn't large enough. And so I think for those folks who are experts in their field coming into tech or trying to build a really big business that they get funding for, it's about building a network so they can understand what's possible. So having tech founders or having venture capitalists in their network who can help them norm on what's expected around things like what we should be building, right? Or how long it's going to take me to build this. Like Neil said, like which market am I addressing? Is it really a $2 trillion market? Can I get really specific about the kind of customer that I want to serve? Or having venture capitalists in their network that they can call up and say, hey, I'm going out to raise a round of funding. What should I expect? So I think it's about building the right network. And it's not just because they're necessarily marginalized communities, but it can also be because they're marginalized and they haven't built that network out. So they don't even know like the language, the lingo, the strategy that they should be utilizing when they go out to fundraise.
Yeah, I think Paige hit it right on the head with lack of network. The lack of a network is the truly detrimental thing in this industry. And for a lot of us, we don't have it day one. And then the going through the process of trying to figure out how to create a network takes too long. And so one of the practical things, going back to what you were talking about earlier, Dennis, and plug to Neil, accelerators help you build that network. Accelerators help accelerate the process of gaining a network. Because outside of that, you just got to go to as many events as you can. And talking about that practically, right? Typically at events, what do? You talk to as many people and you hand out business cards. Well, we haven't been able to do that for the last year, right? We've been doing a lot of virtual events. We've all been on hopping events. And so I'm going to shout out to all the folks here right now. When you do these virtual events, when you go to when these things are going on, you need to be in the chat sharing who you are, what you do, what's your LinkedIn, what's your Twitter, let people put your stuff in there because you don't know what kind of connections you can make. And Hoppin has a DM feature. Y'all should be DMing each other, trying to figure out who to talk to, trying to make things happen, because having a network's a big thing, right? The education piece, right? Like learning just how this stuff works takes time, and that can put some founders behind the eight ball. But here's the last thing I'm gonna talk about is a lesson that was really hard for me to learn, right? And I get pushback on this sometimes, but I'm gonna just keep it real, right? Founders make the wrong comparison when comparing themselves to other founders. So what happens is, specifically, Black founders come to me and be like, yo, This dude who just came out of Stanford without anything just raised $5 million. I got a product and some customers, but why is it so hard for me to get money? And I tell them the problem is you're trying to compare your business to his business. He didn't get money because of his business. He didn't raise money because of his business. He raised money because of his network, because he knew people and he had people who knew him that were willing to give him money. Because his best friend in college, whose mother happened to be the first ever board executive at Disney, who IPO'd 9 companies, decided to give him 50 grand and had a dinner party, and all her friends each pitched in and put money in the hat. It had nothing to do with his business. It had everything to do with who he knew. And so when you come to me and be like, yo, Mac, this other company raised all this money, why can't I? I'm like, well, as a professional VC who evaluates companies, I wouldn't have given his company money either. He's too early too. So let's not talk about that. If you want to compare things, it's got to be business to business. And a lot of times founders aren't comparing the right things at the early stages because of what they read in TechCrunch. The problem is TechCrunch doesn't tell you the backstory. It just tells you the numbers. Yeah. 9 times out of 10, you don't know what happened. You don't know that backstory. And so you don't even know why that money came to be. So don't focus on that. What you need to focus on is building the best company you can and gaining that traction. I know traction is a dirty word, but that's really what we look for to see if you can execute. Traction is nothing but a proxy of execution. So if you don't have customers, if you don't have users, I don't know if you can execute. I can't give money to somebody I don't know can execute or not. So focus on building the best business, and then you come to me. Because my job isn't to make your business. My job is to give you a tool to help you go faster, right? You get venture capital don't mean you're going to be successful, right? It just means you got an additional tool to help you grow. Your job is to figure out how to make this work. So don't get caught up in all these comparisons and all this pity. Like, my job ain't to save you. I'm not here to save you. I'm here for us to grow and be partners and make something happen. So yes. Understand the difference in that, and I'll get off my soapbox.
Hey, that's a great soapbox to be on. And what I heard from all that you said is basically, if you don't have customers, then stop whining. you need to develop a product that people want. Get some traction, get some customers, generate some revenue. And then you have a little bit of leverage when you have these conversations with folks who want to actually cut a check to you. Neil, your thoughts?
Sure. Well, there are a lot of unique challenges, and I think traction is never a dirty word for me, Mac, just so you know. I love that word. I think it's really important to make real, and I think people get caught up in headlines. They don't talk about all the stories of when things don't work out, when things go wrong, because unfortunately, a lot of those stories are undersold and undertold because it's, sometimes people don't want to reflect on those failures and past experiences in that way. But for every headline you see about some major round being raised by whoever and however they look, there are dozens, if not hundreds of other examples of founders that are struggling to just get by, couldn't end up closing or fundraising around it all and had to figure out a way to pivot and bootstrap. So given that experience, the advice that I tend to give specifically to, founders of color, but all founders, this is good advice for everyone, but especially founders of color, is don't wait for someone to give you permission to build your business. All right. Don't hang out and just say, oh, well, if this one gives me money, like if only I had this, then I'd be able to succeed. No, you got to find a way to adjust your business model so that you can make some progress in the short term to show some proof points. So the final exercise I'll share is I tend to talk to founders and I say, well, look, think about like all the money you have in your bank account right now. And if you had to bet that on one company, what would you need to know about that company to feel confident to make that bet? And when I go through that exercise and actually help them understand the economics of our business and what we actually need to do in order to produce a return and to stay in business ourselves, then the light bulb comes on and things start to click a little bit. And then they realize like, oh, I'm going to have to do a little bit more to get an audience with anybody. It's not just about how I look or how I'm perceived. It's also about how my business is performing and what my trajectory is. So just a couple points there, but I agree with everything I heard.
All right. I'm just looking at my notes here, seeing where I want to take this conversation. And as far as, because I know we only have a few more minutes, so I want to be strategic about it. With respect to the role that you currently are in, because everybody is in a position to either advise a business or, fundamentally change somebody's life, let's say. based on their decision. Not giving you guys too much power, but it's true. I mean, it's facts. So with that said, I mean, what advice would you give to someone who is either working on a project or working a full-time job, thinking about maybe doing their side hustle full-time, before they make that leap and move into this realm of entrepreneurship where the failure rate is high and the risk is high and all the challenges we just talked about. I know this is a long loaded question, but what would be your advice? And if you could do it in 3 or 4 minutes or less. Anyone want to go first?
Sure, I'll jump in. So my advice, I'm building off of what I previously said, but when I said don't wait for someone else's permission, what I meant by that is a lot of the times, because I've been on both sides of the table too, in these venture capital rooms, when they have their little Monday morning meetings and when they're evaluating which companies to support, the ones that they're like chasing after are the ones that are a little hard to get because they're already doing their thing, right? So it really pains me to see founders going around on their hands and knees begging for validation from an investor. It's like, forget the investor. If you focus on progress with your business and like doing real numbers for yourself, all of a sudden, like it becomes easier to raise money when you don't need it.
Imagine that.
So yeah, that like people can sense desperation, and when there's blood in the water, the sharks come out. And you don't want those unfavorable terms and people taking advantage of you. So own your own future by trying to design a business model in the early stage that gives you the freedom to choose whether you want to bootstrap or fundraise. And then you can reject any terms that don't make sense, and you can walk away from meetings that aren't resonating with you.
Yeah, I would say when you're getting started, the first thing you need to figure out is if what you're building is something people really want to use or willing to pay for, right? Don't go through the process of, I'm going to get these legal docs done. I'm going to get a trademark. I'm going to get a patent. I'm going to do all these things. I'm going to get a logo. And now I'm open for business and let's see what happens. That's a real easy way to dump a whole bunch of money down the drain. And you don't even know if what you build is what people want, right? The first thing you should do is build the simplest, quickest, easiest thing you can and see if people want it. And the first time somebody decides they want to give you $1 or a penny or whatever for what you're building, now you can turn back around and do all the legal stuff, right? we can solve that stuff. We can solve for that stuff later. What I can't solve for is if you build something that don't nobody want, right? So figure that part out first before you decide I'm gonna quit my job or whatever. And also, if you're doing a startup and you still got a full-time job and your startup ain't making money yet, don't quit your job yet, right? Keep working that job. Keep hating every day you go in the office. Keep thinking about doing your startup every second of the day, right? You be in those meetings looking at everybody like, y'all some zombies. I don't know why I'm here. This is like the worst thing ever. I need to be home building out my... No. Keep that side. Keep that job. Keep working on it as you go. Because what you don't want to do is quit your job before you're ready and your product not delivering no money. And you look up 6 months later, you're like, if I don't get an investment from somebody, I might lose my house. I might lose my car. I might need to go get a job again. But that means I got to do a resume. No. Your company will let you know when it's time to quit. Like when you're actively losing money because you're at work, well, now we're talking something's different. And now that's not everybody's, existence, right? Like if you have a nest egg and you can do that, all right, go all in. Because the more you're all in, the faster you'll move, right? But we know most people don't have that. Most people don't have 20K in their savings account that they can just like, I'm gonna just live off of for a couple months. If you don't have that, don't try and live like how all these other founders are doing, right? Because if you can't call mom and dad and be like, hey, you mind paying my mortgage this month? You mind paying rent this month? You mind paying my car note this month? Like if you can't pick up the phone and do that, don't put yourself in a position where you need that, right? That was a mistake I made with my first company, right? Because everybody said you had to be all in. You got to be full time. That's how you get investment. Now, if you got a good company, you get investment. All the other stuff are just check marks along the way. But full stop, first thing is, do you have a good company that makes sense? Do that first. All the other stuff falls into place.
Yes, and everything y'all are saying. I think have a plan. This is the biggest one that I've been thinking about is the mistake. But first of all, Neil and Mac, I feel like I'm having flashbacks to every mistake I made that you both just highlighted. Just all the mistakes. So having a plan, and I think that plan needs to take into account the worst case scenario. You need to factor in what happens if this doesn't hit, right? So, and you all can probably hear my daughter. And she's very excited to be here too. So what that plan needs to include is how much runway you have, right? So Mac was saying like, hey, if you are going to keep your job, that you keep your job until you can make money, right? But no, when is that date that you can actually quit your job? When do you know you can stop working that 9 to 5 and make this your full-time gig and survive? And then how long can you survive without funding outside of what your customers can provide you? I think that plan also needs to include who your customers are. So one activity that I do with our founders is the Lean Canvas. And it's really getting clear about who your customers are. So when you're building that MVP that Mac just talked about, you're building with them in mind, and then you can take it to them, test it, use that feedback, go back, iterate, and kick another ugly ass MVP out, right? Because it's not supposed to be beautiful. It just needs to work enough to get feedback, and then you can keep going and iterating over and over again. I think the last part of that plan needs to be what kind of business do you want to build? Because if you're building a venture-backed startup, this is a 5 to 10 year journey. Are you down for 5 to 10 years? Is your family down for 5 to 10 years? You need to get everybody on the same page, right? Because if whoever your partner is not down for 5 to 10 years of some really ugly stuff, potentially, this can be really hard on your family. So you need to be very, very clear in your plan about the who, the what, the when, the how you're going to execute against this. And then I think the last part for people who are building companies is when do you think you're going to need to go out and get capital? And who are you going to get that capital from? And it can be different at different stages of the business. So you can, maybe you do crowdfunding in the beginning. And then maybe you decide you want to go after some angels, and then you're going to go after venture capital eventually. But as Neil said earlier, VC is not right for everyone, or accelerators aren't right for everyone. So maybe you're not building that kind of business, and you just need to understand which lever to pull. So which kind of capital to pull, which kind of investors to bring in that are a good fit for what you're building. So I think having a plan with those elements included will really help you make sure that you're being strategic and not haphazard as you're starting your founder journey. As like, for example, my company was haphazardly built because I quit too early. I'm looking for all the wrong kinds of capital. I did not build a good MVP, right? So I just want you all to avoid the mistakes that I've made in the process.
Yeah, and it's easy to make those mistakes because when you're in it, all you see is your vision, and it's hard to see the forest from the trees sometimes. Yeah, hopefully somebody in our audience is building that next SaaS unicorn that's going to have that 50x return and is ready to go. So hopefully we give them that motivation. I got about 5 minutes left. So with that, I'm going to just toss out an open-ended question. Anybody can answer how they see fit. But one thing, and Peg, you kind of already answered some of this, but one thing that you would do different if you could, and maybe a misconception you had before getting into your role as either VC or COO or managing director. I mean, what did you think it was going to be versus what it is?
So I'm gonna take this time to get on the soapbox. Sorry, everybody, I'm about to tail the ball real quick. So the first thing I would do is I wish earlier on I'd have built up more business development and sales skills, because those are the skills that really help you either as a CEO of a company or working in venture capital, right? Because all these businesses is all about your network and growing a network and interacting with people and building relationships with people. Salespeople and business development people are really good at that. Really, really good at that, right? I can't tell you the kind of deals I've won doing these little sales tactics of finding out somebody's wife is pregnant and sending them a gift card to Babies R Us, right? $25 gift card to Baby R Us goes a long way, but that's a sales tactic, right? Sending somebody a gift card or a gift after a meeting, that's a sales thing. Having drip campaigns to follow up with really important people that I want to stay in touch with, that's a business development skill. Yes, I got a HubSpot to set up just for me to automatically send out a meeting, put meetings on people's calendars to stay in touch with them. Because when people say, we should stay in touch, we should do that quarterly. Well, if you really do that, you'd be surprised how many people don't. That goes a long way. But I'm going to go back to something that Neil mentioned earlier. So this is where I get to get on my soapbox, right? Recently, I've been having a lot of people ask me, is entrepreneurship going to be the lane in which is going to drive generational wealth for Black people? And having spoken at the Blacks in Tech conference before, a lot of folks out here are folks who are IT professionals, you're engineering professionals, right? You're not necessarily entrepreneurs today, and you may be in the future. But here's the thing, right? You want to talk about creating generational wealth? Become one of the first 15 engineers at Uber. Become one of the first 50 engineers at Uber. You're going to become independently wealthy. And so one thing for me, I'm an investor in a company called Main Street. It's an amazing company. It's a Silicon Valley gets. It went from a zero to over $400 million valuation in less than 2 years. It'll be it's going to be a unicorn, right? The first 3 Black employees of that company came from my network. One of them being my best friend. And you know what? When they hired him, he called me and said, Mac, whenever you get a job offer, you're supposed to negotiate. He said, what am I supposed to negotiate? They gave him everything he wanted and more. He got more in stock options than I own in the company as an investor. That means if that company does a quarter of what we think it could do, he will become independently wealthy, and my godson will never have to worry about paying for college. You want to talk about generational wealth? That's it. And so for all you engineers out there who are trying to figure out how do you make it big, what you need to be doing is going to all these VC websites, because on all of them, they have job boards. And check out the job boards for the startups they've invested in who are hiring. Because at the early stages, you get some equity, you get some stock. If you get on one of these fast acting companies at a Series B, companies already raised 20 million, 50 million, 100 million. They're still early enough where that stock's going to be meaningful if they get to a real exit. That right there creates generational wealth for Black people a lot faster than all of us going out and starting businesses. Because here's the reality. Most businesses fail, right? But if you get on one of these businesses that already got to a Series B or Series C, which is around the funding, they got real capital, they got people behind them, they got real partnerships. You get in there early, and we're not talking like you're one of the first 200 employees at one of these companies. 200 employees sounds like a lot compared to Salesforce that has over a couple thousand employees, right? If you're one of the first 200 employees at Salesforce, you're rich today. Those are real opportunities for folks like us.
Yeah, and I can tell you, when you look into your E-Trade account and you see 7 zeros, it's a good feeling. Stock options are real. We were talking about that in the earlier conversation, but know that you don't have to run the business or start a business or found a business. You can get on before these companies go public or exit and get what you want. Depending on what the end result is, you can figure out a way to make it work. And there's a lot of folks on this call that could quite easily transition themselves from where they are to somewhere else, and in a short period of time never have to work again. So keep that in mind. We are at time, but I want to give Neil and Paige an opportunity if you guys have anything that you want to say to wrap up.
I'll be really fast. So, oh my God, that was probably one of the best I've heard. What Matt just shared, that's like the ultimate life lead to that, and not just engineering related. There's a lot of other roles that you can get hired for at the early stage to be a part of these companies' success. That being said, if you are interested in building a business, that's where I come in because I can accelerate your growth and progress. So what I'll say is overcoming imposter syndrome. So there's so many things that you're going to say you're not good at, or you don't know how to do, or you're not qualified for, or someone else needs to do that. This could be financial modeling. This could be engineering. This could be early stage prototyping. It could be so many different things. At the early stages of business, there's nothing that you can't do, and there's nothing that you can't find help to get some support to figure out. And being that kind of student of the game and that problem solver, I was not an engineer, and when I graduated from college, I didn't have any engineering background whatsoever. So I took the time I needed, taught myself the skills I needed, and then made it accessible for everyone else. So I'm here to tell you that as somebody who wasn't good at math, afraid of numbers, not good at financial modeling, software engineering, I became all of those things and more. So I just want you all to know that it's possible for all of you all to develop skills that you may not think right now that have the capacity to. And that should hopefully open up the opportunities and options for you for what kind of business you want to scale up.
Paige, any last words, thoughts?
Well, first of all, I just wanted to say, Mac and Neil, so awesome to be on a panel with you. And Dennis, thanks for bringing us together. And thanks for everyone in the chat. I think I just want to remind everyone to be clear about why you're the right person to build your company and internalize that. Have that story clear for yourself so that you can go out and communicate that effectively. And I think that comes in two forms. One, it's you're the person who has the expertise. You've lived this experience. You are frustrated with it. You're tired of it. You want to fix it. Or you're the person who's seen this problem in the world and has the right expertise, and you want to go and build something for other people that need this to be solved. And I'm thinking, I see Sonia Russell, one of our graduates in the chat. She's building this wonderful company called Mindful You. And what I love so much about her pitch deck, I was just thinking, is it's so clear why Sonia is the right person to build this company, right? And it's so clear why people would want to invest in her. She's brilliant. She's inspiring. She's got traction. She has impressive people on her team. And all of that comes back to she's the right person to build this company. So she's figuring out who the right people are to join her team. She's building a great pitch deck. She's building a great strategy for fundraising, and she's changing the world. I think it all comes back to knowing you're the right person and communicating that effectively. So I'm very excited for you all because I know you're the right people to build your business, and just stay true to that.
All right, I'm inspired. I don't know if I'm going to leave my company and start a business, but it's definitely inspiring. And hopefully, the folks on the in the chat and looking online are inspired as well. So appreciative of everyone here. We will definitely be in touch, and I'm just going to take a couple of minutes to get the next folks set up for the next session. We're going to talk about everything crypto, including currency and NFTs and all that stuff. So thanks everyone here, and see you back in a couple minutes, everybody else. Thanks.